3 spine-chilling true stories of haunted nights alone, 3 sinister secrets revealed after dark. The wind howled as if it were alive, a dark and twisted spirit wandering the quiet suburban streets of Indiana. On a stormy night when shadows crept closer and thunder rumbled like a warning, Sarah's heart raced with a chill deeper than the chill of the rain. Alone, she glanced at her kids sleeping soundly, but unease wrapped around her like the storm gathering outside. "Just shadows," she murmured, trying to reassure herself. But whispers from the neighborhood about Mr. Jenkins, their oddly behaved neighbor, floated through her mind like dark clouds. Something felt profoundly wrong. What if? No, she shook her head, she couldn't let fear dominate her thoughts. But only moments later, she learned that Mr. Jenkins was missing. The call to the police was like throwing a rock into a still pond, only to watch the ripples fade into laughter on the other end. Small-town quirks, they called it, and Sarah felt despair gnawing at her gut. She had little choice, though. Bills and a diner shift blinked at her, demanding urgent attention. As she stepped outside into the downpour, Mr. Jenkins' window flickered a strange, hypnotic dance of light, sending icy fingers down her spine. It was unsettling enough to set off alarm bells in her mind. Shadows stretched longer, twisting into grotesque shapes, and with every flash of lightning, trepidation clung tighter to her chest. She was being watched not from her safe cocoon, but from the darkness spilling out from next door. Ignoring the storm's fury, she pressed forward, her heart pounding louder than the thunder. Each step toward Mr. Jenkins' door felt like tiptoeing across a tightrope, carrying her fears as if they were weights. Just helping a neighbor, she whispered to herself, yet doubt clawed deeper. She avoided the malevolent grip of panic. How could she explain that she felt the very air crackle with danger? Before she could turn back, lightning illuminated the threshold. She gripped the heavy, damp handle, adrenaline surging as she pushed the door open. Inside was a tomb, a world locked away from the bustle of life. But the atmosphere thickened with secrets. Was that a whisper she just heard? The stench of decay hung in the air, sending her spiraling into trepidation. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As she stepped deeper inside, dark spots flickered behind her eyes. In the corner, she could make out old books, their spines cracked and dusty. Symbols emerged in her mind as the wind howled outside, whispering the ancient tales the townsfolk had laughed away. This home felt different, alive, yet suffocating. An icy breath brushed against her skin, and in a panic, she spun around. The door slammed behind her, sealing her in. Heart thundering in her chest, she stumbled back, colliding with someone. Familiar yet grotesquely twisted, their face molded in shadow, eyes glinting with a madness lurking just below the surface. As she stared, the echoes of laughter from the neighborhood morphed into sinister cackles, blending with the thunderous storm outside. What had she just stumbled into? As she stood rooted in place, a silent pact settled over her. One truth clenched her in its grip: darkness had crept not just into the home of Mr. Jenkins, but into the very heart of her community, changing everything. Sarah gasped, her breath hitching in her throat like a trapped animal. The figure before her, cloaked in shadows and whispers, stood with a twisted smile, one that wormed its way into her mind, unsettling her very being. As thunder cracked above, she felt the weight of her decision pressing down on her. There was no escape. She was trapped within this malevolent space. The air thickened, stinging her eyes, and she tried to back away, but the dark figure stepped forward, blocking her path. What had she seen in Mr. Jenkins? Was that a hint of familiarity in the creature's face, or was it only her imagination spiraling into madness? She remembered the odd stories about Mr. Jenkins from around town, of faces that showed no reflection and eyes that bore secrets too horrible to reveal. Panic clawed at her chest as the figure inched closer. She could hear the tapping of its fingers on the doorframe, a torturous rhythm in sync with her racing heart. As her pulse drummed in her ears, Sarah struggled to recall the last time she had felt safe. The clutter of the dim room became a prison. Those dusty books, the rotting wood, everything felt alive, breathing in tandem with the darkness. She fought the urge to scream, squeezing her eyes shut, yearning to escape the enveloping terror, but nothing happened. Instead, she heard faint murmurs echoing through the haze of dread. They grew stronger, more urgent, luring her deeper into the shadows. "You belong here," a voice crooned, sinuous and smooth. It coiled around her, and she felt drawn to it, like a moth caught in a flame. "You must join us." Suddenly, a shrill scream pierced the chaos, ripping through the walls as though the house itself was crying out. Sarah jolted, pulling herself back to reality. "Get away from me!" she shouted, her voice quaking. Raw desperation surged within her. She turned and darted toward the window, instinct kicking in and overriding her terror. Reaching the cracked pane, cold etched into her fingertips, she shoved against the glass. It held firm, a cruel reminder of her prison. Behind her, the figure stood silently, an undefined shadow brimming with malice. She could feel it watching her, waiting for what? Would it devour her or recruit her into whatever hell Mr. Jenkins had birthed within these walls? The window began to shudder, vibrating under the force of her desperate pulse, and she pressed harder. It resisted at first, but with one final thrust, the glass shattered, splintering her reflection into 1,000 pieces. She couldn't afford to think it was now or never. In one fluid motion, she tumbled through the opening, the storm instantly hitting her like a wave. The rain washed away her fears for a fleeting second, but she couldn't stop now. She glanced back as she scrambled away from the house, feeling a chill, colder than the rain, slither up her spine. That was when she saw a group of shadowy figures standing at the window, all gazing at her with hollow eyes. Everything she had dismissed in her mind rushed back. Mr. Jenkins wasn't just absent, he had perhaps been transformed, or worse, replaced. Stumbling into the night, Sarah's instinct screamed for escape. She had to warn the others, but as she turned the corner to her street, dread crashed over her. The familiar houses, her neighbors, had all the lights off. Was she the last one left? A bone-chilling laugh echoed in the distance, and a sense of foreboding seeped deep into her bones. Whatever dark secret had claimed Mr. Jenkins might now have its sights set on her. A flash of lightning illuminated a figure lingering at the end of the block, a figure she recognized all too well. What choice would she make next? Before she could take a breath, an unearthly howl resonated through the night, turning her blood to ice. She felt the darkness closing in around her, and then she heard it, a whisper trailing through the wind, "Join us." The edge of terror now loomed closer than ever. What awaited her on the other side of this nightmare? Sarah turned on her heel, adrenaline pumping through her veins. The laughter, like jagged glass, cut through the fog of fear. It echoed again, warped and sinister, sending chills dancing down her spine. She hesitated only for a moment, quickly shifting her focus back to the darkened houses, feeling their emptiness around her like a hungry beast. The figure at the end of the block remained, a shadowy silhouette against the storm-lit sky. Recognition twisted like a knife in her gut. It was Mr. Jenkins, or what had once been him. She squinted through the rain, trying to comprehend what she was seeing. He shouldn't have been here, not after what she had just escaped. "Sarah," he croaked, his voice twisted and distorted, an echo of the man she once knew. He took a step forward, and she felt the ground beneath her tremble as his foot struck the pavement. "You've come back to us." "No. Stay away." Panic burst like a dam inside her. She backed up until her heels hit the cold metal of a fence, but she didn't know where to go. There was nowhere left to run. "Stop," he said, each word dripping with malice. "You can't leave us now. We want to show you the truth." Thunder cracked again above, reverberating through the night. The figures in the window she'd seen earlier seemed closer now, their faces obscured by shadows but unmistakably human, their empty stares locked onto her. "Join us," they hissed in unison, voices blending into a haunting symphony. The feeling of being hunted clawed at her. If she stayed standing still, they would surely descend upon her. Quick breaths caught in her throat. Think, Sarah, think. With a sudden burst of resolve, she darted down the street, water splashing around her ankles as she fled, every nerve screaming at her to run faster. Branches whipped at her face from low-hanging trees, cutting her skin. She couldn't look back. Behind her, the howling grew louder, mingling with the cracking thunder. Whatever they were pursuing, whatever malevolent force Mr. Jenkins was now a part of, was gaining on her. Then a light flickered ahead, cutting through the dark. A diner, still open at this hour. She sprinted towards it, praying for safety. As she neared, though, the light flickered again, just like her hope. Would the inside hold salvation, or was it just a trap baited with false promises? She burst through the double doors, tears mingling with the rain on her cheeks. The clang of the bell echoed inside. A few patrons turned their heads, their expressions morphing from indifference to surprise. "Help me!" she gasped, collapsing onto a counter stool, her heart racing. The waitress, with her slick-back hair and bored eyes, didn't seem to care. "Just another late-night drama," she muttered, going back to scrubbing a greasy plate. "No!" Sarah shouted, leaning forward, desperate. "They're coming. You have to listen to me." Her voice trembled. The shadows danced behind her, the echo of sinister whispers crowding in the corners of her mind. The fleeting warmth of the diner faded as she realized no one believed her. Then a sound that froze her in place arose from behind, a soft, slithering hiss. They were here. Before she could react, the diner's door swung open with a force that rattled the very foundation. Mr. Jenkins, now a twisted shade of the person she once knew, stepped through, flanked by the hollow figures from the window. "Sarah," he crooned, that eerie smile stretched across his face, "you've returned. Join us." The words wrapped around her tight, squeezing her breath away. There was no exit. No escape from the darkness that sought to snake her back into its grasp. Would her greatest fear become reality, pulling her away from the flickering lights of life into a world where shadows ruled? As she stared into those deep, hollow eyes surrounding her, one final thought pierced through her panic: what had ever truly become of her neighbors, and who would be left to save her from this nightmare? A heavy silence fell like a shroud over the diner as Mr. Jenkins advanced. The patrons shifted uneasily, eyes darting between Sarah and the figure that once commanded respect in their small town. Something deep inside her, a vestige of survivor instinct, screamed for her to act. "Get out!" she shouted, her voice cracking. "He's not who you think he is." But the waitress merely rolled her eyes, her back turned again to the unfolding horror. The others sat frozen, as if each knew the truth yet chose to remain in denial. Mr. Jenkins chuckled, a hollow sound that sliced through her. "Bind them to us, Sarah," he crooned, gesturing to the others sprawled at the counter. "They crave the warmth of our truth. Show them." The shadows around him grew larger, almost spilling into the diner, dark and seductive. Her heart pounded like a drum. She could feel their eyes, those otherworldly eyes boring into her. They didn't speak but beckoned her with twisted smiles that twisted her stomach. "Run!" A voice whispered from the far corner, a trembling man, wide-eyed and soaked, gripping his seat as if it were a lifebuoy. Relief washed over Sarah. Someone had heard her and was still sane enough to understand the danger. "Leave him!" Mr. Jenkins hissed, and his form began to contort, stretching and reshaping as if he were too full of malice to contain it. "You will join us, Sarah." She backed away, clinging to the counter, heart racing like it was about to burst. The diner doors slammed shut with a force that rattled the glass, sealing her fate. An electric jolt of fear surged through her as she realized that Mr. Jenkins' grip was extending beyond his body. An unseen force pressed against her, drawing her toward him. "Help me!" she screamed again, desperation bleeding into her tone. "You have to believe me. Please." The people around her only stared ahead, hypnotized by Mr. Jenkins. They muttered words she couldn't quite catch, whispers that seemed to echo from the walls around them. Your time to awaken is here, Sarah. Join us in the shadows, each patron chorused, their voices melding into a chilling symphony. In an act of sheer panic, Sarah lunged for a knife on the counter, grasping the cool metal in her trembling fingers. It felt like a poor weapon against the darkness closing in, but it was all she had. Stay away from me, she barked, holding the knife out like a shield, heart racing at the sound of shuffling feet behind her. Do you really think you can fight what has already embraced you? Mr. Jenkins sneered, the shadows swirling around him in a wild dance. Don't you see? They want you, just like I do. The offering of eternal unity awaits. Embrace it. Never. She spat back, adrenaline fueling her. She spun around, scanning the diner for an exit, but the patrons were like statues, locked into Mr. Jenkins' trance. That a pulsing wave of dark energy pushed against her, sending a shocking pulse through her bones. But just as she faltered, the tremulous voice of the man earlier broke through. Fight it! He shouted. It's a lie. The eruption of sound surged through her like a beacon. Just then, the shadows quivered, flickering as if fighting against light. Fear pooled with defiance. What if she could break their spell? Suddenly, the power of belief surged in her chest as she took a step towards the dark figure. You can't have me. I choose life. With that declaration, the floor beneath her feet began to vibrate, a tremor coursing through the diner. Mr. Jenkins reeled back for a moment, his face contorting with rage. No. You belong to us. The walls began to shake, dishes clattering on the counter, echoes of their horror rising to a deafening climax. Light flickered chaotically, straddling the fine line between salvation and despair. Sarah had one chance, one fleeting moment of reckless courage. She darted toward the door, knife clutched tightly, one last thought flashing through her mind: would her flight unchain the others, or was she damning them to the dark? But as she reached for the handle, darkness poured in behind her, dragging her back with a force she never anticipated. Would she escape this cursed place, or was she about to seal her fate in the very shadows she fought against? Their laughter twisted into a mournful wail, chilling her to the bone. The darkness surged, clawing at Sarah with invisible hands. She cried out, the knife slipping through her grasp as she fought against the relentless pull. It was as if time itself began to stretch, every agonizing second filled with dread. The shadows snarled, 1,000 voices rising to drown out her pleas. Let me go. She shrieked, grappling for anything to hold on to. The counter was slick beneath her fingers, and with one last desperate reflex, she gripped the edge, holding herself steady against the tide of horror, but it was useless. The very air thickened, forming a heavy mass that suffocated her. Mr. Jenkins' laughter echoed through the diner, vibrating through her bones, mocking her futile struggle. It's too late, Sarah. You're already part of us. Just like that, the diner shifted. The chairs scraped back as if alive, flinging themselves from the tables. The patrons, still entranced, began to sway like leaves in a storm, their eyes glazed over, void of humanity. They whispered fevered secrets to the flickering lights above, and the air crackled with energy that sent shocks through her skin. Find the light. The soaked man shouted again, but his voice was barely audible over the eerie symphony of Mr. Jenkins and the shadows. The man's eyes darted toward a narrow window at the far end, a sliver of moonlight breaking through the encroaching darkness. That's our chance. Hope flickered in her chest. Summoning every ounce of strength, Sarah summoned her will. Get away from me. She roared and, with a surge of adrenaline, pulled herself free from the counter. She dashed through the mass of despairing bodies, her heart pounding like a war drum d'amar. Jenkins seemed to lurch toward her, his shadow elongating and twisting, transforming into monstrous forms attempting to ensnare her once more. But Sarah didn't look back, she just had to reach that light. Stop her. A patron hissed, finally breaking free from the fog. His eyes blinked in confusion, a barbershop owner she used to chat with. He lunged for her, but she dodged deftly, her clothes brushing against the rising tide of darkness like fingers trying to pull her back. She slashed at the air with her knife, scattering smoke-like shadows that shrieked as they surged away from the blade's edge. The diner's lights flickered again, the wild strobe of hope and despair intertwining, as if teasing her sanity. But in that moment, it ignited something deep within Sarah. "Together!" she yelled, tears streaking her cheeks. "Fight back!" The soaked man stumbled towards her, still gripping his seat. He seemed to breathe life back into the others. "We must believe," he implored the patrons. One by one, their senses slowly returned. They blinked awake from the nightmare, fear written on their faces, uncertainty flickering as bright as the lights overhead. "Help me!" Sarah begged the barber, desperation spilling from her as the patrons slowly began to rally. "We can break the hold." And just like that, the tide shifted. Voices joined in solidarity, a chorus rising above the shadows. "Fight it!" they shouted, eyes blazing with newfound determination. The darkness pulsed around them, a fierce battle of light against shadow. The diner trembled, walls creaking under the pressure. Sarah bolted towards the window, knife poised. If she could just break through, they could escape, but as she reached for the pane of glass, it transformed before her eyes. The moonlight warped into a river of black, swirling and alive, and fear cut deeper than any blade. She took a breath, fully aware of the weight bearing down on her, sensing the chilling presence of something ancient and seductive lurking just beyond her reach. "Sarah!" Jenkins' voice slithered through the chaos like venom. "You really think they can save you?" Her hand hesitated. Could she trust the faces behind her? But the shadows intermingled with fear and hope, and for a fleeting heartbeat, it felt as if they might actually escape. But could she trust the dawning fight? Was this unity strong enough to break through the night? The question hung heavy in the air as Mr. Jenkins' laughter rose again, echoing hauntingly in the dimness. And as the moonlight flickered, the shadows coiled tighter than ever. The moonlight flickered, a taunting mockery as it twisted into phantoms of despair, and Sarah felt herself teetering on the edge of that precipice. Panic coursed through her veins, igniting her instincts. She had to decide: believe in the unremarkable faces behind her or surrender to the smothering darkness. "Sarah! Don't think!" shouted the soaked man, his voice raw and torn. "Just act." She didn't have time to think. Gripping the knife tightly, she lunged for the window again, but the glass, slick and oily, oozed despair. A cacophony of shadows surged forward, writhing like snakes, snapping and hissing, their hollow eyes fixed on her, as if tasting her resolve. Then she heard it, Jenkins' voice, smoother than silk, draping itself over her. "Why fight? You know they can't save you. They're just as trapped." He feasted on her fear, each word embedding itself in her psyche. Screams erupted from behind. The barber stumbled, clutching his temples as shadows bore down on him. "No. Fight it!" he cried, but the tendrils of darkness began to consume his form, pulling him into a night where screams faded into silence, time fractured. The diner's walls trembled again as if the building itself was alive, teetering on the brink. The rivulets of shadows seeped into the floor, pulling at the soles of her shoes, dragging her slowly backward. Around her, the faces of the other patrons twisted in agony, confusion etched on their features. She could see their eyes scanning the darkness, desperate for clarity, but shadows coiled tighter, making them mere puppets. One by one, their shouts dissolved into the creeping fog, their unity crumbling beneath the weight of despair. "Stay with me," Sarah croaked at the soaked man, who was now struggling to stay upright. "We can do this together." His eyes met hers, and he nodded sharply, breathless determination shimmering through his muddled panic. "Together!" he yelled as he lashed out at the shadows, his arms flailing like branches in a storm. Something inside Sarah snapped. She couldn't just let despair win. "We must fight together. Hold on to the light." But even as she said it, the dark tapestry tangled around her legs, threatening to pull her down. The dim lights overhead flickered violently, casting fractured silhouettes that danced across the diner. A haunting refrain echoed, a lament of lost souls calling out in pain, urging Sarah to relent, urging her to flee. A sudden rush of ice swept through the room, freezing everyone as a thundering crash shattered the mounting tension. The door banged open, sweeping a gust of frigid air that flared against the darkness. "Get out!" A voice bellowed, accompanied by a flash of shimmering light, cutting through the veil. It was a local officer, brave enough to shatter the barrier. "Quick, while there's a chance." But even as hope sprang anew, Sarah could feel the shadows writhing more viciously than ever, enraged by the sudden light. They began to pulse and hiss. An angry swarm of darkness twisted around her, desperate to drag her back into their embrace. With a final desperate surge, Sarah broke away from the grasp of uncertainty. She dove towards the light, gripping the soaked man by the sleeve and yanking him along with her. He stumbled, but they surged together toward the beacon of salvation. "Don't look back!" she shouted, adrenaline pumping through her veins like fire. "Just keep moving." But just as they reached the threshold of the doorway, something snatched at her ankle, a last-ditch attempt by the shadows to claim their prize. "Sarah!" The soaked man cried out, hands outstretched, just a moment from escape. The darkness roared like a chorus of demons, and she knew this would be the moment that decided their fates. As the shadows writhed in fury, Sarah's breath hitched, her heart racing. She had to face the darkness one last time to sever its hold before it swallowed them whole. Would she muster the strength to fight back? Or was this the final clasp of the terror that would consume them both? The decision trembled in her throat, a single heartbeat between life and oblivion. The shadows clamored louder, a cacophony of shrieks and hisses drowning out reason. Sarah felt the icy grip around her ankle, a skeletal hand reaching from the pits of despair. Panic mixed with rage. She couldn't let herself get dragged back. Not now, not after fighting her way this far. "Let go!" she screamed, voice cracking as she fell to the floor, scraping her palms against the splintered wood. She could feel the darkness pulling, it wrapped cold tendrils around her, but she would not be another lost soul swallowed whole. "Sarah!" The soaked man's voice was a lifeline, cutting through the suffocating panic. "Just push forward." Biting her lip, she forced her trembling hand to grip the knife tighter, its blade glinting like a beacon in the stifling gloom. Rage fueled her, igniting the space within. "I want to let you take me." She slashed downward with all her strength, aiming where she felt the darkness was thickest. The knife met nothing but air and fear, but the shadows recoiled as if stung. They tightened around her, furious and trembling, palpable anger radiating like heat waves. Sarah scrambled forward, dragging herself on the ground, desperate to reach the threshold that beckoned her into the flickering light. "Come on." The soaked man's hand grasped hers, pulling her up, but the weight of the darkness felt like a sinking ship around her legs. With one last surge of determination, she twisted, slashing again. The air burst with an agonizing wail as something shattered, like glass breaking. The phantom grip on her ankle faltered, and, with a final cry of defiance, she tore herself free from its grasp. Adrenaline surged like fire in her veins, giving her strength. They stumbled together into the light, bursting through the door into the cold night air. For a moment, the world outside felt oddly serene. The gentle rustling of leaves and the soft glow of stars was a stark contrast to the chaos behind. But as her pulse began to slow in the cool air, the soaked man's face shifted from relief to horror. "It's not over," he breathed, looking back at the diner as shadows slithered through the doorway like smoke, trailing after them into the night. "Run!" Sarah yelled, panic ripping through her anew. With every heartbeat, darkness crept closer, its tendrils reaching hungrily into the world beyond the door. They sprinted down the street, feet pounding against the concrete. But the shadows streamed after them, whispering secrets and haunting phrases that nipped at the edges of her consciousness, coaxing her to despair. The chill of fear burrowed deep, a barbed reminder of what they narrowly escaped. I don't know how long we can run," the soaked man gasped, struggling to keep pace. "They're everywhere. We need to find a way to fight back, to stop them." Sarah's mind raced, working through the fear pressing on her chest. She looked around, the dim streetlights flickering like dying fireflies. There's gotta be somewhere we can hide something to help us. With each desperate glance, she caught fleeting glimpses of the lurking shadows, their forms shifting menacingly. Then, in the distance, a flickering sign emerged. A bar, lonely and dark amongst the gloom, stood at the end of the block. There. Sarah pointed, her heart thundering. As they approached, a deep thrum pulsed through the air from within. But even as they neared, an overwhelming dread surged in her gut. Surely, she thought, in a place like that, darkness would just find a new way in. But what choice did they have? Hand in hand, they stepped toward the bar's entrance. As the door swung open with a creak, the shadows seemed to retreat momentarily, as if recognizing a rival they had yet to conquer. But would the light within prove strong enough to fend off the darkness? Or would it become another trap? The thought clawed at her mind. With a breath heavy with uncertainty, they crossed the threshold, stepping into the unknown. The air inside the bar was thick and stale, filled with the scent of spilled beer and desperation. The dim lighting cast long shadows across the wooden floor, and the only sound was the soft jazz music floating from the corner, as if trying to drown out the creeping dread that followed Sarah and the soaked man inside. She glanced back at the door, half expecting the shadows to come pouring in like a wave of black water. "Stay close to me," she whispered, her voice trembling. He nodded, eyes wide as he scanned the room, searching for anything that could help. They stepped deeper into the bar, the wooden counter gleaming faintly under the flickering lights, like a false promise. A few patrons sat hunched over their drinks, oblivious to the terror that lurked just outside. Their faces were gaunt, hollow-eyed, as though the shadows had already taken root within them. "Maybe they've seen them," the man said, gesturing towards the lonely figures scattered around the room. "Ask one of them." "Are you nuts?" Sarah shot back. "They look like they've seen hell and come back for more. We need to keep moving." Just then, a raspy voice drifted from the far corner. "You think running will save you?" A woman, draped in a tattered coat, leaned against the wall, the dim light casting grotesque shadows across her sunken features. "They'll find you here, like they always do. There's no escape from what lurks in the dark. And you are." Sarah snapped, heart racing at the ominous words. "The keeper of this place," the woman hissed, a sly smile revealing yellowed teeth. "This bar is a sanctuary, yes, yet even here, shadows seep through the cracks. You feel it, don't you?" The soaked man glanced nervously at Sarah. "What does she mean?" "It means we're not safe," Sarah said, fear rushing through her veins. "But we can't stay here." "Why not?" The woman pressed, her voice a haunting melody. "This is where the dying come to rest, where the lost attempt to find their way again. You're like them." Her eyes gleamed with something that looked almost like sorrow. "You just don't know it yet." "Shut up." Sarah snapped, struggling to hide the tremor in her voice. "We've fought too hard to give in now." As if summoned by her anger, the shadows in the corners thickened again, curling around the legs of the bar stools. A deep, guttural laughter erupted from nowhere, resonating through the room as the patrons shifted uncomfortably, their eyes reflecting a knowing darkness. "Do you see?" The woman continued, her voice dripping with malice. "You think you can outrun the inevitable. But every step you take leads you closer to despair." With panic clawing at her throat, Sarah grabbed the soaked man's arm. "We need to find a way out now." In a rush, they turned back towards the entrance, but the bar door slammed shut with a decisive thud. The laughter grew louder, echoing off the walls, mingling with a chorus of hissing whispers. A sickening realization clawed at Sarah's insides. The shadows had followed them and were closing in. "We're trapped," she groaned, panic welling in her chest. "No," the soaked man said, voice shaky. "We can fight. There has to be something here, something we can use." But before she could respond, the lights flickered wildly, plunging the bar into darkness. A freezing gust of wind swept through, carrying with it a chorus of anguished screams. Sarah's heart raced as she felt the hairs on her arms stand on end. Deep down, she knew the shadows were far from forgiving. What lurked in the corners of the bar, waiting to be unleashed? As a wave of chilling laughter rolled through the air, Sarah's grip tightened on the knife. There had to be a way out, or a way to confront the evil that had chased them this far. Look! The soaked man pointed toward the back. A faint light flickered, pulsing like a heartbeat. Maybe that's our way. But what lay in the darkness beyond? With tension crackling in the air, Sarah took a breath. They had to find out. There was no other choice. With a determined push, Sarah moved toward the flickering light, dragging the soaked man behind her. Each step felt heavy, like walking through syrup, as the laughter of the shadows thickened around them. It was a sinister symphony, rising and falling like a dread-filled tide. "Stay close," she hissed, stealing glances over her shoulder. The patrons now seemed more like faceless husks, their eyes sunk deeper into their sockets, staring ahead with an unsettling emptiness. The light pulsed ahead, dim yet strangely inviting, a small beacon in that encroaching void. As they neared it, Sarah felt a prickling sensation at the back of her neck, as if the shadows were reaching out, trying to snag her. "Do you see it?" she asked, the light casting an eerie glow on their faces. "What do you think it is?" "I don't know, but it seems alive," the soaked man replied, his voice barely above a whisper. The air grew colder as they approached, and the laughter faded to whispers urgent and fervent, as if they were exchanging secrets about the newcomers. "Turn back," one murmured. "You don't belong," another hissed, a chilling echo of the woman's earlier words. Together, they reached the source of the light, a small, unmarked door set into the wall. It was weathered, the wood cracked and splintering. But there was something pulsating behind it, thrumming softly like a heartbeat. "Should we?" he asked. "We have to," she replied, pushing the door open with a creak that sent a jolt of fear through her. The moment it swung wide, a rush of frigid air enveloped them, thick with the scent of damp earth and something metallic. The room beyond was dark, save for a few flickering candles set upon a stone slab. The light flickered weakly, revealing walls covered in strange markings and symbols that seemed to writhe and shift in the dimness. "What is this place?" the soaked man muttered, stepping in hesitantly. Sarah followed, her senses on high alert. "Looks like some kind of ritual space," she breathed, the whispers now curling around them like fog. "Maybe we can find something here to fight back." As they stepped deeper inside, a low growl emanated from one corner. Sarah froze. A pair of eyes glowed from the darkness, staring directly at them. It took form slowly, a figure shrouded in shadow, absorbing light like a black hole. "Did you come to join us?" the creature asked, voice smooth as silk yet dripping with menace. It stepped forward, revealing elongated limbs and a face twisted in mockery, eerily familiar. Somehow, it looked like the woman from the bar. "Get back!" Sarah shouted, instinctively raising her knife. The soaked man stumbled backward, fear etched on his face. The creature smiled, a sickening grin that split its face. "Your fear is so delicious, you think you can escape, but you've already taken the bait. What do you want from us?" Sarah demanded, her voice edged with panic. The creature leaned closer, its breath cold and foul. "Your souls belong to the shadows now, the darkness sings your names." With that, the lights flickered violently, plunging them back into the suffocating darkness. The echoes of chilling laughter surged around them again, sharp and taunting. "Run," the soaked man urged, dread flashing in his eyes. "We need to get out of here." But where to? The door was lost in the chaos of shadows. They were trapped not just within the bar, but in a web of despair that stretched beyond the walls. With darkness crawling underfoot, gripping their ankles, Sarah felt a moment of betrayal. Hadn't she just wanted to escape? As the figure lunged from the shadows, Sarah's heart thudded painfully. They weren't just trapped. They were prey. The unholy laughter rose again, drowning out her thoughts, her breath, until all she could hear was that chilling melody. What horrors awaited them in the shadows as they fled? A shooting pain stabbed her arm as she felt something sharp brush against her. She turned just in time to see the sinister figure lunging again, the darkness coiling around it like a living thing. What awaited them when the shadows finally struck? The cold grip of fear surrounded Sarah and the soaked man like a vice, squeezing the breath from their chests. The shadows writhed around them, hungry for their despair. They darted through the darkened room, wild with terror, desperate for a shred of hope. "Where's the door?" she gasped, glancing back. The flickering figures blurred into one shadowy mass, the laughter and unsettling rhythm echoing in her ears. "Over there," he shouted, pointing toward a faint outline. But as they turned to flee, the twisted creature emerged again, blocking their path. Its grin widened, revealing jagged teeth that caught glimmers of candlelight. "You cannot escape the truth. You are part of this now." "No!" Sarah shouted, summoning a burst of defiance. She charged forward, knife clutched tightly, aiming not for darkness but for the truth that path illuminated. Just as the creature lunged, Sarah swiveled, slashing through the air. The blade met nothing but the swirling shadows that howled and screamed in agony. But the beast staggered back, stunned. In that moment, she caught a glimpse of vulnerability, a flicker of something deeper beneath the malevolence. "Come on!" she yelled, grabbing the soaked man's hand and pulling him toward the barely visible door frame. They burst through, the shadows rolling back as if frightened of the light that flickered outside, a glimmer of hope breaking through the storm. Once outside, they stumbled into the night, panting. Rain poured down, washing away the remnants of dread. But the shadows lingered just beyond the bar entrance, their ominous whispers clawing at the edges of Sarah's mind. "They'll still chase us," the soaked man gasped. "We need to find some way to drive them back." There, near the dim streetlight, something gleamed in the wet grass. It was a small, battered mirror, reflecting the light in a prism of colors. The light! Sarah gasped, as realization struck. It's all about the light. They grabbed the mirror, positioning it to catch the soft glow of the streetlight. As they angled it, beams of light burst forth, chasing away the shadows creeping closer. Whispered mouths dissolved into muffled howls. "Use it. Hold it up!" Sarah shouted, heart racing as shadows pushed forward, snapping and roaring against the barriers of light. With newfound purpose, they dashed down the street, using the mirror to fend off the darkness chasing behind them. Each reflection surged with energy, pulsing bright beams like a shield. "Over there." The soaked man pointed to a nearby park, where flickering street lamps stood as sentinels against the enveloping darkness. Together, they navigated the winding paths, fear-heightened clarity shooting through their veins, guiding their every move. As they reached the park, the cacophony of shadows seemed to pause, swirling in confusion against the blinding light. The shadows recoiled, retreating to the fringes of the path. Suddenly, a flash illuminated the sky. One more time, they heard Jenkins' twisted laughter. "You think you've won? We will always be here lurking." Sarah's heart raced, determination surging. "Not if we fight," she shouted, lifting the mirror skyward. Light burst anew as they faced the encroaching darkness, and in that moment, something shifted, the shadows shrank back, as if light had severed their grip. The soaked man squeezed her hand, eyes fierce. "Together. We shine brighter together." With steady breaths, they focused on the flickering paths around them, radiating courage and light, a unified front against the writhing mass. "Let us drive them away," Sarah yelled, and together they turned toward the darkness once more, unleashing the powerful glare that danced within their hearts. With one final surge, they bolted toward the street, pushing against the shadows that thrashed like wild beasts. The shadows writhed, caught in the brilliance of light, dissolving into dissipating echoes. Then came silence, overwhelming silence. Breathless, Sarah turned to see the soaked man beside her, eyes wide and sparking. They had done it. The shadows lingered at a distance, watching with a sinister glow, but they were kept at bay. "We're safe," he whispered, disbelief coloring his voice, but a hollow fear bubbled in her chest. This was not a victory. They had just barely escaped. The shadows might be at bay, but they were still out there, wrapped around the neighbors, whispering their sinister songs. "We have to warn them," she breathed, the weight of dread twisting in her gut. As they looked back, the darkness slinked closer, but together they gathered courage. For every battle fought, there was a truth born from light. They would return, not just to face it but to expose it for what it was, confronting the shadows that haunted this small town. As dawn broke on the horizon, lighting their path ahead, they knelt in resolve. They would reclaim their community, and they would not go back empty-handed. With renewed determination, they set forth into the waking day, prepared to share their story, for those who would listen. Their battle wasn't over, but the fight had only just begun. The light would conquer and together they would shine. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.